Hello, and welcome everybody back to the Unily Podcast. Back with me, Matthew Boyd, but also back returning from the silver screen, our wonderful Unite hosts. I'm blinded by the light. There's so many stars on this podcast this week. We have Alex, Kaz, and James, all of who have just been heavily involved in our 3 half-day employee experience extravaganza. So let's check in with our wonderful guests on the podcast. Alex, coming to you first. How did you find Unite? How are you feeling now it's over?
I have to admit I'm a little sad now. I was pretty much on a high for the whole day afterwards, and then a whole week and maybe a few more days where there was just all the ideas and energy going through my head. And now I'm here and I'm thinking, when can we do it again? So I'm ready. Bring on 2023. I'm just going to rush through time.
Way more ready than I am for it. I mean, that is one hell of a production. It really takes it out of you if you ask me, but you guys were absolutely killing it over in the London watch party. I saw some pretty wild shenanigans when we checked in with you. Any notable memories you want to share with our avid listeners?
I know that you all think of me as like an extreme professional, so it was somewhat difficult for me to do my job while I was being yelled at by Gordon Ramsay.
We've got some fish and chips that we're being enjoying.
Yep, those are for me. Okay, thank you.
Come on, really, guys? What's going on?
I think you've got an intruder.
Fuck me. What is that, darling? Yes?
Fish and chips?
Fish and chips. Look at it. It's not even cooked. It's still swimming, darling.
Okay.
Unbelievable.
This is the best food. Don't stop there. We have got some bangers and mash. I mean, this is some of my favourite.
Really?
Okay, so today we also have some really interesting events going on. So we're starting with Stephen Bartlett.
Chicken, darling. It's raw, darling. You're going to kill someone.
Okay, I won't eat that.
Unbelievable.
But I'm okay now, and I think I managed to survive that one okay. And then, of course, there was all the wardrobe alterations. I really liked some of the accessories that were offered to me. You know,
Superb.
Flowers in the hair, sunglasses. That was great because there was just something missing from what I had chosen.
Yes.
Fabulous.
The sunglasses were amazing, and of course you were backed up by Nick as well.
Yeah.
Absolute legend with his fancy dress in there as well.
Someone missing, I think.
Hello. Welcome to London, where the party did start really early this morning. I'm already feeling the island vibes. Somebody's just asked me where Nick is. I'm not actually sure, so I'm going to try to hold it down for a little bit here.
Oh God.
Hi, Nick.
Got the wrong island.
Yeah.
For those of you who weren't there in the London watch party, but maybe are thinking whether or not you should join next year, you only get to see those fancy dress outfits if you come join us live. So, more reason to get involved. But of course, you were hosting our London watch party, and across the pond, we had the wonderful, the insatiable James Noka. How are you doing?
I am doing good, Matt. Thanks for finally having me on. Long-time listener, first-time caller.
Good. Yeah, man, it's been too long. We're so glad that you finally found time in your very busy schedule to join us.
We're finally bringing class to this donkey show.
Cool. Well, I think maybe you're referring to me there, but tell me, favorite bits of Unite. Obviously, you were hosting the New York watch party with Alexa. Looked wild.
Oh, yeah. We tried to make our entire wardrobe look like neon 80s synth pop became like an ensemble. The brightest colors conceivable. I wanted to keep getting like more ridiculous like stuff on my face, and Alexa told me stop doing that. Like, we had crazy glasses the entire time. We had hats that we were ready to wear. I wanted more and more lays to go around my neck, so I looked like a Clydesdale pulling a plow through a field with like that thing on its neck. Like, I don't know. It's probably for the best you talked me out of that. It was incredible.
Yeah, and I mean, while we had the master of the idiot sandwich over in the UK, what did you have going on in the US? I'm pretty sure you had someone wandering and sauntering into your watch party, right?
Hello! All right.
It was incredible. Captain Jack and I, we actually just got back from 3 weeks at sea. It's incredible. We were raiding, we were plundering, we were engaging employees. It was a blast. He really is a surprising master of digital workplaces. You wouldn't think it.
Now, obviously, today we're going to be talking about integration, so I'm going to have to ask you to lay off the rum a little bit so you can contribute heavily to this conversation. But I'm glad you and Jack had a whale of a time. There was a nautical pun in there. That's why people join the podcast. So, last but by no means least, Kaz, I mean, obviously, host extraordinaire. You've done it before, so returning to the stage, how you feeling, man?
I'm feeling so good. We're geographically back together now, so
I know. Back in the UK, they tried to split us up. They can't keep us apart.
The forces brought us back together. But I'm very good. Like Alex was saying, I'm kind of buzzing off all the like energy and inspiration from all the different sessions. And I think for a week or two after, I was like jotting down ideas, like just before like you should be going to bed. You're like, oh, someone just came to mind, writing that down. But I also had fun, definitely like celebrated as well. What was funny though, when we finished off at the we finished off in the studio, obviously you had in New York as well, we like popped a bottle to celebrate. We finished that bottle, and then by the time I thought like I'd started to a good extent, but by the time I got to the watch party in London, they'd been going for hours. They were half cut when we got there, so I walked in, I was like, oh my god, okay, well, I've got some catching up to do.
Yeah, you were lagging behind a little bit. Yeah. But I mean, such are the responsibilities of a host like yourself, you know, you had to kind of stay dry till the 11th hour. But I mean, obviously, you know, I'm going to throw what I think must be a very cool memory for you straight at you, which must be Stephen Bartlett, right?
He was amazing. Like, I actually had to watch back, because when you're in the moment listening to some of the stuff, you're absorbing it and you're kind of playing some of it back. But then I remember thinking after, like, there's a particular thing he said, and I want to go back and think about the language he used there. And I think there are layers to some of the things he said as well.
And one of the things when we're thinking about whether remote working or hybrid working is best for the well-being of the employees, the other question we have to ask is, from a company perspective, what is work and what role does it play in people's lives? And if you feel connected to your team members, will you feel more connected to the mission? Is that a first principle truth?
So that was definitely a highlight. So really interesting there.
I'll tell you now, like, you know, obviously when the sessions are on, the hosts are sitting down, resting our feet, and I watched your Bartlett interview and it was amazing. So for those of you, again, shameless plug, because Unite is just gonna keep on going year in, year out, bigger and better every single time. If you didn't attend Unite this year, stay tuned for the announcement for next year, because it is not one to miss. And then, you know, from that, behind the scenes of the podcast, the Unite conference, and all the other great events that we get to be a part of, there is a wonderful marketing team. How they snared Bartlett as a guest speaker, we will never know, I guess. You know, a magician never reveals their tricks, but he was fantastic.
I can only return the favour, because we were you could hear a pin drop in the London studio when you were doing your demo with the session with Will.
Yes.
And so that was we were all sat there like watching, like, come on, Matt, just on the other side of the Atlantic, and it went very well. So, and I think Will was great as well. So I was watching that to kind of hear how he would respond, and it's always really interesting as well to see how he sees the development of the company and where it's going. So that was inspiring, and your bit was a big part of that as well.
Yeah, I mean, well, the demo gods were kind, and they've been crueler on other days, so I'll take that victory. But of course, we were there getting together with thousands of people around the world to talk about employee engagement and employee experience, and hearing from your own CEO in that kind of interview style atmosphere really kind of does a lot to engage all of the Unily team as well. We love that just as much as our attendees from outside the Unily organization. So fantastic event. But obviously now I want to kind of dig into today's topic, because our listeners are looking for guidance about all things employee experience. And I feel like between the three of you, and maybe with a few tidbits from myself, we've got some knowledge to share. So today's topic, and it is a very important topic, is the topic of integration. Now, I think, I want to kick things off, but as always, open forum. The importance, I think, that we're seeing around integration at the moment, a reason we're going to be talking about it today, is really because more and more what used to be called the traditional intranet, which now has moved on to be the modern employee experience platform, is being positioned at the center of the digital estate. It is the kind of beating heart of the digital work environment. And because of that, the need to bring disparate systems together is kind of increasing with a view of this one central platform that connects everything. So for me, that really kind of speaks to the nature and importance of integration. But I mean, each one of you works in kind of different spaces and has worked in different spaces across the Unily business. So I'd like to start just by getting your take. Why do you think integration is so important right now when we talk about digital employee experience?
Yeah, I speak to clients, potential prospects all the time, and one of the, big asks is for a digital front door. How can we not only get quicker access to information, but more and more, I think what a lot of businesses are looking for is a sort of way to multiply other investments they've made in their tech stack. Over the last 10, 20 years, however long you want to go back, so many best of breed systems for this and that task were brought into the fold at large enterprises, and some of them fall by the wayside. They get underutilized. They get used by one team, but everybody can use it. And they want to be able to promote the fact that, hey, we have a subscription to this, that, and the other thing, to other areas of the business, and assess how their colleagues are engaging with that given application. Maybe it's a deep link on a homepage. Maybe it's a search experience. How is it that our employees are using this? Is there a way we can use it better? And maybe there are certain ones that we can phase out in favor of a consolidated platform. So, it's really an important subject, especially as you assess like the ROI of your tech stack investments or in a digital workplace.
Yeah, that's it. I like that. Let's come back to that. The multiplier effect on the integrated systems. Very cool. Obviously, both Kaz and Alex have worked in the consulting team for Unily, so worked with clients trying to do this. Kaz, I feel like maybe you've got some insight on this as well.
I think in terms of like what it's offering, I think if you think about the different journeys that business has gone through over the last 5-10 years, even accelerated in the last 2 to 3 years, is a process of like digitalization. And when they go through that process, they try and identify parts of their business they can digitalize. And when they go through that process, they come through line of business applications that are sometimes, the best in their field. We're talking about the Salesforces of the world, the ServiceNows of the world. These are tools that are excellent at a particular subset in the technology. And so what happens is when you try to digitalize something, you find the right tool for it, and you've picked the right tool because it does what you need it to do. But gradually over a period of time, you're adding one piece of technology, another piece of technology, and kind of like, as James spoke about, gradually you get this whole tech stack, which you haven't really thought about the end employee and the right experience, both from like a productivity perspective, but also from like a efficiency, understanding perspective, knowing what tool to use for what purpose. And so in the background, you may have world-class tools that are excellent at doing what they're supposed to do. But once that's finally got to the end employee that needs to do their job, there's a mismatch of what you want. And so the employee doesn't get the best experience. And I guess integrations come about by trying to fix or partially fix that problem.
Yeah. And I mean, what you spoke about there, especially in terms of digitization and, basically, God, I feel like we always mention this, but when you talk about the pandemic, rise of remote working, and now kind of hybrid working as a kind of an outcome of that, which is, depending on where you sit on that discussion, here to stay. You're right. There has been increased app proliferation. You have to find tools that fill the gaps, for the physical side of things, which are then kind of equally traded off against that kind of remote hybrid scenario. And even before that, the topic, one of the key phrases that I used to hear in relation to app proliferation was shadow IT. You know, people just going out and basically, because software as a service was on the rise, people would be like, hey, I could just buy an internet-based subscription to this system and it can come out of my budget and I don't need to tell IT. And then you had, again, app proliferation. So it's kind of like, you know, we're talking the last kind of, I don't know, 7-8 years, probably something in that kind of timescale, which is crazy. But what about you, Alex? You know, why is integration so important right now?
I think I take it from another angle. Obviously, I've worked sort of both lenses, really, in terms of talking about integration when it's something we really need to have because we want that digital front door, as James has said. And then also on the other side of it as a consultant, where we're trying to make it happen. You know, we're trying to ensure that we have that seamless employee experience. And that's really the focus throughout the journey that people are taking. What I also like about integrations and the conversations we have around them, the whys, the why nots, is it is also a tool in terms of change management. So let's say, for instance, your employees are using a set of tools and it's a little bit like a patchwork, right? They click on this, they click on that, they're sort of clicking in and out, but they are familiar with these apps, with these platforms that they're using. Being able to bring them all together and integrate them into that sort of seamless employee experience means that I don't have to change everything. There's a little bit of familiarity for me there. And I find that that is, for me, probably the best reason to undertake integrating certain apps. It could be because you want to promote them. It could be because they're just regularly used. In a way, I think those things are sort of balanced, but it's being able to say, you know, when we're going to roll this big new platform that does all these other things as well, we're bringing everything together, single pane of glass, front door, however you want to call it, you'll see the things that you're already familiar with and you'll be able to take it from there. So not every journey starts with a mystery. Some of them will start with some familiarity.
That's interesting. And you know, the really funny thing, if you actually compare the way both you and James answered that question, why is it important, and the way Kaz answered it, speaks a lot to your roles, right? Because both you and James talked about started your responses by talking about the benefits, right? Here's why you should integrate, get a multiplier effect on value for existing tools. And then Alex says, create more seamless user experiences where everything is just one smooth click away. And then Kaz goes into problem solving mode as a product manager and goes, there's lots of apps and tools in the system at the moment. App proliferation is a real problem. How do we solve it? So you can see you guys coming in like, here's the positive angle. This is what you need to know. Kaz is like, how do I fix the issue that we know that organizations face right now? But I think all of them are super important points. And actually, James's one, you know, first time on the podcast, already coming in with that, with the big hitting knowledge, the multiplier effect on value on existing systems. Such an interesting angle to take, because we always say you only get value from systems that you use. And if there's always a barrier to use that system, whether it's another login, whether it's having to click into it just to go and do an approval, whatever that kind of barrier becomes, value is diminished, right?
Yep. Oh, yeah. And I mean, it's as simple as tracking a user's engagement with a given app and tool. If you have your employees collecting the URLs they need to access in their bookmarks bar, it's hard to assess how they in aggregate are accessing these different point systems. But if you're consolidating it into a digital workplace where we can track how they're going into this or that system, then we can really assess where they're at, and we can make changes to promote these underutilized systems, given the data that we have, to different stakeholder groups throughout the business. And that could be as simple as creating a more relevant, app access experience. I don't want to be inundated with every app the business has invested in. I only want those that are relevant to my job. Or it's creating like, oh, you need to access HR systems. Here's all your HR apps on a page, all consolidated for your convenience. And I think it speaks to a broader point too, when we have the discussion of integration, is that an integrated experience for the sake of integrating an experience is not necessarily the best approach. And I think this goes to what Alex's point was that just because you have made this investment what does integration mean to you? And not to get philosophical, I'm not here to become a professor, but it's like at Unily we have 5 different conceptions of what an integration could be. Everything from a deep link to your system that doesn't require you signing in again if you go from Unily, to as sophisticated as some transactional system with your different tools. So really, we don't want to forget about the importance of outcome. When we think of integration, we have to we really have to let that drive the purpose for integrating a third-party system with a digital workplace.
Yeah, no, 100% makes a lot of sense. And so interesting as well when you kind of talk about Alex's point and Kaz's point in combination, app proliferation and more seamless experiences. I guess there's a question there really which revolves around the kind of friction caused between moving from system to system, right? I think, that phrase digital friction, I think has become more commonplace. I think Gartner kind of talk about it quite a lot, which is the burden of moving from system to system. The app proliferation piece that Kaz talked about really is about, just like James is talking about multiplier effects for increasing adoption of other tools by integrating. Kaz's point is a multiplier effect on the negativity, right? Lots and lots of tools increases the amount of potential digital friction because you're using more tools to do your job, right? So interestingly, we talk about digital friction and it makes you think, oh, technology, right? So that's kind of like a problem point with technology, but actually it's not, right? That's a people problem, digital friction. That is, what kind of impact do you think digital friction has on employees?
How many times a day do you find yourself clicking between this and that application, and how many times are you prompted to sign into something? Here's a question for the group. I used to have to, in the old days, before I even joined Unily, I had to save all of my passwords, or not my passwords, my URLs into those bookmarks. And now I need to sign in to each and every one. And I'm bouncing between systems at least, 8 times a day, at the very least. That's a light day. If I want to search across a different tool, I don't always want to have to sign into that tool, especially if I'm on the go. I travel a lot for the company, and I like having the convenience of searching, for instance, in my role, Salesforce, for information about the accounts that I'm working with, especially when I need quick insight into who I'm dealing with for that day. And it's easier to go to one place where I know I can get the answer than think do I want to go to the Salesforce app? Do I want to sign in on the mobile browser? No, it's the less we can think. I know that sounds a little counterintuitive, but the less we have to think about where to go, the more seamless the experiences. And as I like to say, you're going to cringe at this one, we can turn digital friction into a digital fiction. Right?
Oh, God.
And so that was the last time James Noker was on the Unily podcast.
Yeah. Okay, well...
Thank you very much, folks.
If you are watching now, get in the comments section. Tell us, is that
yes,
a no-go?
Yes, all complaints. Please email Ian D. Fiore with all complaints about James Noker. All right, that's IAN. No.
There we go. I mean... It's a fair point. It's a fair point, even if that last bit made my tails curl. But it's a good point.
There's 2 things there that I think I agree with, because one of the reasons I paused was I was trying to think personally, when I sit at a laptop, what are the points where there are different tools that ultimately hinders my experience or worsens my productivity. And the one that 2 that James picked up on, I think the first one is there's mental effort involved with the switching, right? It's a bit like if you're in a house, when you go to one room and then you forget why you're there. It's confusion. Aside from the time it actually takes to switch, there's also mental effort in getting to that room and thinking, oh, why was I here again? But then there's also, if you think of the average employees, everyone on this call is relatively tech savvy. We understand the purpose of different tools. The average employee doesn't have the time to dedicate to understanding what is the purpose of every tool and what sits here. Now, you may have knowledge articles out there that explains that, but the reality is people are doing their jobs. And so I think James kind of set me up for this one, which is that, like, what you really want is for the employee not necessarily to know what the right home is for knowledge or to do this, but to be able to go to one single place and to be able to search across all the different strands or apps that may be out there, and for the right thing to be returned from the right app. So those are kind of, I guess, like the two issue or opportunities, I guess, depending if we look at it positively.
And I was going to say that the conversations that I've had, thanks for mentioning the different roles, Matt. The conversations I've had from both sides, I always kind of go back to, and I don't always refer to it as a strategy for how you're going to approach this, but what I'm talking about is how are you going to make that experience better based on what the people that are going to be using it need to have from that. So take away from the sort of maybe the productivity element of it and come back to what do you want to have happen? What would be the ideal situation, and work backwards from there. And quite often there are a lot of opportunities that will come up as well. So the first thing you're going to be looking at is what applications and platforms are you going to be integrating and why? Okay, that's a great place to start. But the next piece might be, so what do I want to have happen with that? Is the experience in that particular application that great if it's taken independently? Is there a way in which I can improve that experience by integrating it with my digital front door? And of course, the answer is yes, there are a lot more opportunities in that way when we're looking at it. And so this is one of the conversations we have is yes, we're focused on the experience, but we're focused on improving the experience, not mimicking it by placing it in a different environment, really. And I think that that's something that's important to remember because, again, as Kaz was saying, and James, so we're all pretty smart people, it's you can have a purpose and there's a underlying reason why your organization is using these applications. But as an employee, I don't need that to know that necessarily. I need what's in it for me. How am I going to get to it? What am I going to do with it? And make it intuitive and don't make me think too hard. And I think that's really where we start in a lot of those conversations.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And I mean, one of the big things that I was trying to, that I want to kind of really touch on as well is that, again, it's a people-centric problem, not a technology problem. And one of the main things is that if you kind of look at some of the Gartner research around it, they draw like causal links between digital friction and employee burnout. So they say, people's jobs have inherently got more complicated because there is increased app proliferation. You get apps for every kind of task under the sun now. So a job, any employee's job, an information worker predominantly in this case, has become more complicated because they have to use more systems to do that job. And as part of that, then there's more context switching, which is the digital friction. First, I'm looking at this system where we're tracking ideas for the next product enhancements. Then I go to this system where that idea is then, surfaced to a bunch of people for voting. Then it goes into a backlog for prioritization. Then there's a separate place where, estimation for the size of development cost goes. Then it goes back into a roadmap and a different system, which is then surfaced to customers. And that's just kind of one tiny thing, like managing a product roadmap. Right. And that wouldn't be someone's entire job. That would be like one part of someone's job. So you talk about like take a simple process and you're talking about kind of 5-6 different systems in that flow. And, what Gartner research was pointing to is that kind of causal link between the quality of the work experience being diminished by the friction that happens to complete that process. It's taking longer to do the work. It's more arduous to do the work. So if we talk about a process like that, it's like being able to say, right, this is now ready. This idea from someone is now ready to be voted on. Click a button and it shoots it off to the system where it takes the relevant information, shoots it over. There's no copy and paste. There's no kind of publishing effort, things like that, right? So for me, that's the kind of why it's become a people problem, because it's making the work we do in some cases less enjoyable, and therefore like leading to faster burnout rates in a time when people are already feeling quite kind of, burnt out because of the massive shift in working styles and patterns, relating to to other kind of external events and factors. And they gave this interesting statistic as well. 68% of workers spend much of their day, I don't really know what much of their day means in terms of like a specific categorization, but much of their day toggling between apps. And I mean, for me, I can totally believe it. Like, what do you guys think?
I was going to say, this kind of goes back to some of the things that we were discussing. And I think, in fact, in Stephen Bartlett's interview at Unite. So it just kind of alerted me to a couple of things. Some of that burnout comes from that kind of perception of a loss of control. So you hired me to do a job. I'm struggling to do it because I'm spending a large portion of my life toggling between all these apps. And so by not making it simpler for me, there's a slight loss in agency. So I've come along and I want the freedom to be able to work in the way that I need to work, right? That it's that flexibility sometimes, but it's the freedom to make those choices. And by being forced into this, then this, then this, then this, and not knowing why in a way sometimes because I don't know the reason why we're using this app versus this app, then again, I might start, the stress levels are building, the burnout is building, and it's really something that's affecting me as a human, as a person, but it's something that could be changed and remedied through being able to remove some of that friction and giving me my agency back.
And I think that's a really good point. And I think, across all of that, I think we have a very good picture now of why integration is so important. Some of the challenges that organizations face, app proliferation, more complicated processes, more involved multi-team processes, which ultimately lead to, more portions of that journey in different systems. And then, of course, on top of that, you've then got, the sense of burnout, the context switching, digital friction, how that distracts us, tears us away, removes agency, which all sounds terrible. I get it. If you've only watched this part of the podcast, don't leave now. You're going to feel very sad. But of course, that's not the end of the story. We're now in, a wonderful place from a technology standpoint, turning our attention to what's possible. You can integrate these systems more and more, software as a service, cloud applications with secure and powerful web APIs, allowing systems to do that kind of the digital handshake. I do like that phrase. That is cool. The digital handshake, pass information securely between them, and make things that used to be copy, paste, one click push to, which is amazing. So let's take our audience on that next step of the journey. So they recognize they're feeling some of what we've just talked about in their organization. How do you get started? How do you go about kind of doing the integration? Go on, Kaz, you've got the answers.
I remember from when working in kind of implementation, probably there are different companies that have gone about it different ways, and some have found success and some haven't. But like one of the ways that I quite admired was the way that EY looked at it, which is that the reality is there are loads of processes, hundreds, thousands of processes that employees are going through every day. What are the top 100? Let's start there, right? Because we're not all spending time doing very niche processes, or there might be the odd employee that goes through one process, but the majority of employees are doing repeatable processes in systems. These are things like, take them like ServiceNow, for example. It might be looking across the knowledge base. It may be logging a ticket or a service request. Things like in HR systems will be booking a holiday. These are the simple, repeatable tasks that most employees are doing when they're doing tasks in their workday. So let's not invest time in trying to boil the ocean and end-to-end integrate absolutely everything, because that is both cost and time intensive. And also there are some niche processes that exist within these systems that are there for a reason. They're specialist systems. But let's take out the things out of that we know employees are doing day to day. Work out what that end-to-end process is. It might be one platform, it may be two, it may be three. But let's make sure that that process that people are doing daily is of optimum experience. It's integrated into the front end or the front house of their kind of digital HQ.
I like that already. Like, it's very democratic, do you know what I mean? Take a look at everyone's problems and kind of like knock down the biggest ones first. Very cool. And we have to shamelessly plug this, right? Because it's a free resource, but we did the kind of integration priority spreadsheet. Do you remember? Like, so, for those of you listening to the podcast, maybe haven't attended other Unily events, we run a free masterclass in cities all around the world all year long. And we did talk about, and Alex, I'm going to come to you for a definition in a minute, the single pane of glass experience, which is, something Alex is going to explain for us all. Set up there, Alex, I'm sorry. But we created a really cool spreadsheet, and it's more than a spreadsheet. It is a tool. You can plug in all the different integration ideas you have, provide some information about them in terms of how often they're used, by how many people, blah, blah, blah. And it will spit out in a graphic your top 100, whatever number you set as like the top integrations. So it's a tool literally for integration prioritization. So how do you start the process? And which is what Kaz has just spoken to, which is boiling the ocean is probably going to be disastrous. Now we call the integration story the single pane of glass experience, Alex, don't we?
Yes, we do.
Yes, we do.
I keep saying digital front door, single pane of glass. It is a single pane of glass because what we're giving you is that view into it, and having these tools to hand, because we'll not lie, all of my experience in my career, not just the Unily piece, there are opportunities where we can really help stop the overwhelms. So you're going to need to integrate, you want to. It isn't an either or decision that you're able to make, particularly within your team and your organization. So using a tool like this allows you to do that. It allows you to see what's really being used. And then from there, the next stop is, if I am looking at this as a single pane of glass, what does that mean for me? And what does that mean for these top 100, let's say? I've actually worked with enormous organizations who can drill it down to 20. They're big 20 powerhouses. But again, that's where the real focus for them is. What would give you the most value in that single pane of glass?
Well, okay, that's a great question. Let's ask James. James, what do you think are the most impactful or popular integrations? If you had to, you're pressed, obviously you can let's set some ground rules for James so he doesn't just go off. So I think you can name specific applications which you think are popular, but you have to give like the context of the use case of the system. Like, so you could say, if you were to pick, for example, Workday for HR, you'd have to say it's a HR system and these are the kind of scenarios. So you have to, be broad so our audience who don't use the specific tool you name still get good knowledge. So go on, most popular and most impactful integrations according to James Noka.
Okay, all right. Number one, something transactional. I think is the in the form of a style of integration. I kind of want to go down from our integration maturity list, because I think that's what most people think of intuitively when they think of an integration. So to borrow from the HR example, I want to submit a request to HR. I don't want to go into Workday to submit that. I want to do it natively from a single pane of glass. I fill out a form, and then that sends it back. It writes back to that third-party system. I can retrieve information from it. Maybe it shows me an inbox of tasks that I already have to complete for that HR service, and then I can write back to that system when I've marked it down. I think that is one of the big wins, like what we have with our Microsoft To Do integration, where I can keep track of tasks and tick them off as I complete them and write new ones as they arise. I think that something like that is really powerful.
Cool. So in your mind, it's less about the systems that you think are priority and impactful, but it's actually about pushing for something which is more than surface level, more than just presenting information, but lets you complete, well, I guess what we would call, what do we call them? Microtransactions. Microtransactions. That's it. Yeah. It's like it's a one click, it's a click kind of thing, which you can do without switching context.
It could be considered microtransactions, but I like viewing it from the employee experience. As an employee, this is what I would like to do. I would like to minimize the systems I'm toggling between, and that would be a very easy way to do it. Like signing up for an event, you write in your information, and then you get the file back into your calendar. right? I'm not bouncing between different sources. So I think experience isn't necessarily about the system, although that's going to set the framing for how we can conduct that integration. It starts with what do we want to get out of that integration, and then everything else descends from there.
So, I mean, it's an interesting one. It's an interesting one just because when you talk about transactional integrations, those are probably some of the most complex because you need to be able to, so like, okay, so James just straight in there just owns it and says, so would your advice to those talking about starting an integration strategy be kind of take the very cream of the crop, right? You pick like 3, 4 and make sure they're deep transactional integrations would be the best place to start rather than going broad and quite shallow. You think that the kind of deeper, smaller number might be a better way to spend resource?
I do, because but only in the context with reach, right? Like how many people are going to benefit from this style of integration? That's going to, be the value factor in that, because you don't want it to just be for 5 people. You want it to be for as large a portion of the organization as possible. So you get that scaling factor in. And then as budget and time allows and you mature along the employee experience model, right? You start finding, okay, the next layer we have, our product and IT departments are both using, let's say, Zendesk for, not necessarily Zendesk, Jira, something to track projects and other things like that.
Atlassian technology is a good one. Yeah.
Exactly. So maybe now we create a search experience. We're not going to be doing the work in our single pane of glass experience because these systems do it best. But I want to be able to get like not a report, but an output from our search experience of projects I'm currently assigned to. If we can capture data as
summaries, kind of like here's the at a glance view, kind of dashboards.
Exactly, but nothing's ever going to be perfect, right? We are an integration by way of it being our system or a system communicating with another system is limited by what the third party can expose from a data perspective that can then be visualized, which is another way to sort of ground the conversation of integrations. We don't want to sound like we're like poo-pooing, like, oh no, you don't want to do it that way. But it's, we are limited by what data can be exposed and we can visualize. So that's sort of like, where we have to come to reality and face that the desired experience may not be possible only because that information might not be secure enough to transfer between systems. It might not be available for exposure from the third-party system to be visualized. It is a very complex discussion, but ideal state, I think the transactional integration is what most people think of. Thus, I think that's what is considered to be the most valuable.
Okay, cool. That's that's a really good one, because obviously when you need to get something done, that's usually one of the biggest driving forces for switching context. And if it's small, the microtransaction style thing, I can see why that would be considered high priority, most impactful. Kaz, what about you? Do you agree microtransaction, or you got something else?
I kind of teased one earlier, but I'm going to flesh out a little bit more, which is I spoke about the problem of like app proliferation and like how can we make grounds in slowly fixing that. And for me, that comes from bringing information that sits elsewhere in different apps into one place, and being able to kind of search across it. And a key thing that comes to mind for me is knowledge and documents. There is knowledge and documents sitting in so many different tools. It can be in ServiceNow, in Salesforce, in Google, in Box, and all these different places, Microsoft 365, SharePoint. There's all these different document and knowledge sources out there that are happening. And I think the best thing you can do is let's just put a ring around all these knowledge sources and bring them into one place. And so let the employee, they might not know where that's sitting. There are sometimes I don't know if that's a SharePoint document, is it in Box, is it sitting in the intranet? It doesn't matter. Let's have a single search that allows me to look across all those different sources.
Huge.
And that for me is, I'm a search first person, so I'm probably a bit biased there, but
Oh, it's interesting.
Oh, sorry, I was going to say, I think that
go.
enhances the single pane of glass, though, because you're thinking about it in terms of here is the way that I look at these platforms, here is my experience, and I'm looking for how is it going to be presented to me? And we might be thinking inside of a box there and saying, oh, it's going to be presented to you always as something you can then go and click. But what if I'm doing something else and I want to be able to search across these things, or, my mind's just gone to that, and that will be one part of one of those deeper integrations, is being able to bring that back into that sort of search mentality, or finding it, not finding the app itself, but parts of it, the information from the app that is coming across to the thing. So I think from my perspective, and kind of in line with what James and Kaz have both been saying, my feeling is that integrations are always an opportunity, and those conversations we need to have for the deep ones are also an opportunity to be able to really understand specifically what you're using it for, how we can help make that happen, what it is that the experience is going to be, depending on the people looking at it and looking for it, and then how we can make that all happen in a sort of simple but viable manner.
And secure, right?
And secure. Yep. Thank you.
Yep.
James.
Well, that's it, isn't it? Right. I mean, like, we always talk about this. It's like, what you really need is just modern applications that follow best practice security, support modern authentication models, and where possible as well, support that kind of single sign-on experience where one digital identity provided by your company can get you logged into all the different systems. I mean, it super simplifies the whole integration thing, right? Call it a thing. The whole integration story is heavily simplified by having that single digital identity centrally managed, then using a single sign-on application, or an identity provider that supports that kind of model, so you can just bounce from system to system without constantly having to remember passwords. I mean, that is part of the dream, I guess. It's probably one of the, really, it is a form of integration, isn't it? It's integrating that identity provider, into all the different tools that you use day to day. On Kaz's point, search, huge. And the other thing we haven't touched on when we talk about benefits and opportunity, and I love this in relation to search, because I think search is one of those things that looks and feels different in many systems, is the unified design and user experience. How many times do you have to learn how to search in every different system? The search bar's up top left, search bar's bottom right, search bar has filters along the top, along the bottom, has a fly out. Search is one of those things where, yes, everyone has a search bar, but where it is, what it looks like, how you filter, refine, the way results are designed and presented is always different. So interpreting what, a piece of information has come from system X versus system Y, when you do integrate and you get that raw data, you can then design a single consistent design approach, which makes it so much easier for users to interpret results, right? You don't have to kind of there's way less, it's like we said before, and God, I feel it's a strange thing to say, but just less thinking. I don't want to have to, don't make me think. Just give me the answer.
I just want to find my stuff.
Yes.
That's what I want.
Yes, right. So Alex, obviously, James coming in with those transactionals, Kaz coming in with search. Any other high priority or big win kind of integration stories, types of integrations that you might recommend to our audience today?
I think ways to socialize other, content, or what you have in your digital workplace, what you have in your single pane of glass, is a great way to consider an integration as well. I've just found this very informative FAQ. I'm going to share it out, and we're going to bring it back. Draw people back into the investment.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Because the one that I was kind of thinking of there, that I was that I kind of would be interested to explore, and I don't see this very often actually. So actually, Alex, I'd love to get your take, as if this is something you've seen, is the notification integration, because that's the other thing. Notification counts everywhere, all fighting for attention.
Yep.
So. Yep. I don't see it very often. Do you see integrated notifications, like one place for all your feed?
I don't see them often enough. But what I get is a lot of questions around it. And for me, bizarrely, and I know it's just one element of all these other systems we're talking about integrating, but just imagine a world where they're all in one place. Single pane of glass with all of your notifications. Wouldn't that be wonderful? So again, I have seen it done, and I have seen it done really effectively. And I think that for me, that, as you said, is kind of that piece that maybe you're not thinking about as an organization. But if you're focusing on the people, single pane of glass, and the experience they're going to have, don't make them go to 67 different systems to find out what needs updating or what needs their attention. Put it all in one place where you can make it sensible and make it useful for them.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. I want to see that more. I'll tell you what, if you're watching the podcast today and you've done this, send us an email, drop us a line. Maybe we can have a guest speaker on the podcast who wants to talk to us about integration strategy for notifications. And, as long as they're better than James, they can have his seat. I'm joking, James, I'm joking.
It's going to be you who goes first, man.
It will. It's going to be me. It's going to be me. Get rid of the donkey. But in summary for today's podcast episode, integration opportunities are upon us. The opportunities are there. We recognize the challenges. We're all feeling them. But the technology is there to kind of integrate our systems and deliver better user experiences, better employee experiences by focusing on integration strategy. Do look out for that free resource from us on integration prioritization. Like Kaz said early on, don't try and boil the ocean. It isn't about trying to integrate every single system at once. And if you actually tried to do that, God, you'd probably pull your hair out in frustration. Pick the key wins. Look at making them transactional to give that kind of back and forth for information. Look at unified search. And if you're feeling really brave, go for that notification story. And of course, the things to look out for are, making sure that you can get your users authenticated, looking out for security best practices, partnering with your IT team, I think, on this topic. If you're from IT, you probably haven't learned much from us because you have all the technical knowledge already. If you're not from IT, definitely work with IT. It's great opportunities for the whole organization. So guys, as we close into our final minute, any parting thoughts, that you want to share with our listeners?
Bring the ideas. Bring the ideas. We can always learn about these things. What does single pane of glass mean to you, and what are your priorities? Hopefully, notifications.
Yeah, nice.
I think we used the word experience a lot, kind of throughout the podcast. I think what might be good is if part of that qualifying is understanding, if you listen to your employees, where are the experiences that are failing, and how because that's, if we're talking about experience and we want to improve that experience, what better to integrate than maybe potentially improve an experience at the same time.
And building on that, keep it user centric. They're the ones who are going to be using it. Don't just base it on this is what I want. Use what the employee needs to get out of it, not just you, I guess.
Yeah, no, it's a good one. It's a good one. So often we have the best intentions to improve the employee experience, and then we forget to speak to the employees, which is crazy. It sounds crazy, but it's easily done. You just kind of let's just get this show on the road and really plug away at it. And then, it can be an easy step to miss. Awesome. Well, as always, almost an hour flies by, faster than you realize. James, first time on the podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure. Definitely getting an invite back. Alex, Kaz, returning superstars. As always, it's been wonderful. For those of you who stayed to the end, thank you very much. And we will catch you on the next one.